Kota nidra jao maya pisachira tole. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Tomare loite hoinu avatara. This is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu speaking. He says, life after life, you've forgotten about your purpose. You took birth, and in the process of being born in the womb, you prayed, once I get out, certainly I will serve you. But once coming out, you forgot your promise. Your family members came around you. They said, "Coochie coochie coo." They all smiled at me. And then, as a young child, I played. In adolescence, I was absorbed in social affairs, work, and old age again. I took birth yet again. Please remember, he's saying, now I've come as an avatar just to save you and bring you back to home, back to God. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare. What's the next line? Next one. Thank you. N-A-G Shore Nashibaro Lagi. Harinam Mahamantra Lao Tumi I'll do it again. Harinam Mahamantra Lao Tumi Thakur has written a song, and he says, Enechi Ashaudi Maya. Shaudi means medicine. Speaking through the mouth of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he says, I have brought special medicine to cure you from all the troublesome dealings of this world. And it's in the form of a mantra called the Maha Mantra that goes Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. But he says, to get this special medicine is going to cost you something. It means you can't be too proud to beg. You have to really want it, and you have to beg for it with all your heart. And that medicine then will be available to you in abundance just by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Bhakti Vinodatra Charani Puriya. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, I fell down at the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Shri Hari Nama Mantra Lailo Magiya. Magiya means to beg. He said, I begged for the holy name and I received it. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol. Nitai Gaur Premanande, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki, Shri Harinam Mahamantra ki, Shri Harinam Prabhu ki, Gaur Premanande. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol. One of the ways to be safe in the world, or one might say the only way to be safe, is to find a person who is unassailable, who has completely pure heart, and who has set a course through the way that he or she has lived his or her life, and to find out what their modes of living are, their conceptions, their lifestyle, and what's the S? Sentiments, conceptions, and lifestyles, and follow in their footsteps. And actually, this is part of the process of bhakti. It's called Satovrate. Satovrate means to find the person who you want to become like, and then to find out what he or she did to become like that, or the path that he or she set, and then follow it. Why don't we move up by 12.4 inches? Because the wonderful devotees in the back are getting blasted in the sun. Okay, we need a little more volume, one of our experts has said, and I could speak closer to the mic. Thank you. You call the lights on. The lights on. Everyone comfortable? Okay. You happy over there? Necessities, as Prabhupada put it in one place. I was speaking about Satovrate, which means that there are those who have chalked out a path. This is recommended in the Srimad-Bhagavatam. How many of you here have read Srimad-Bhagavatam? Okay. Srimad-Bhagavatam is the essence of all the teachings of bhakti. And in the Srimad-Bhagavatam, it is said that the path of bhakti is aided by finding a person who can guide you like a captain guides a ship. It's been over the ocean several times. And also by having favorable breezes. Favorable breezes means that you get the benefit of hearing books like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad-Bhagavatam on a regular basis. And it's self-evident that these are spiritual. Self-evidence is important. Just like this morning we saw the sun come up and nobody debated whether it had come up or not. We had a really good idea that it was there. Everything changed. The heat, the light, all the animals responded. Everyone responds spontaneously. And so similarly, there are self-evident aspects of spiritual practice. One of them is reading the wisdom literatures like Srimad-Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and so forth. And the other is following in the footsteps of great acharyas, those who teach by example. And this is recommended in the Srimad-Bhagavatam. It's said that they, those who are exemplars of the process of bhakti, they create a system for themselves and then they leave it behind for others so that we can easily cross over the troublesome ocean of the material world. Ocean means it's impossible. If you've ever been thrown in the ocean even a little bit beyond the shore, you know that it's a frightening experience. In fact, Cat Stevens in an interview, do you remember him? I forget his other name, my apologies, but he was saying that one day, he lived in Malibu, California, and he went out for a swim by himself on a fairly peaceful day and waded out a little too far. And then he realized that he wouldn't be able to get back. He was being drawn out to sea and there was nobody there to help him. And then he said a prayer spontaneously. He had never believed in God before. But he said, if you show yourself to me and bring me back in somehow or other, and spare me this one time, I'll be attentive to you from now on. And just then, a little wave, just big enough to pick him up, came in and transported him back to the shore. That's when he dedicated himself to God. And since then, he's been fully dedicated. There's a story in the Srimad-Bhagavatam about an elephant named Gajendra. And he was in a similar jam. He went out into a lake one day. It's a long story about Gajendra, but he got the elephant. Gajendra was the king, and he got captured by a crocodile. Crocodile grabbed him by the leg. And at some point he realized that he wouldn't be able to get out of it. And we have these experiences throughout our life, don't we? When we have a minute of clarity that actually I'm helpless. Have you ever had that? Oftentimes I think I'm independent, I don't need anybody. But when my hand becomes paralyzed or I suddenly realize my identity's been stolen, all my wealth is gone. I mean, there are moments like this that happen. I'm speaking about the material ocean and how difficult it is in the ocean. And we see it all around us. It's reported every day. This happened to such and such a person, and I think, oh, it won't happen to me, but it does. And Gajendra was a very powerful animal, so much so that in the forest everyone respected him and got out of his way. And some followed behind him and said, we're with him, you know. And he felt good about it. And he had a family. Family loved him. He loved them. He was actually, as elephants like to do, helping his family bathe in the lake. He was spraying them. Elephants are very intelligent. they become very attached. There's a couple elephants in Mayapur, and have you ever met them? I talked to the trainer for 3 hours. She told me how if she goes away for a few days, when she comes back, they're so attached to her, they come running from about a mile away to greet her, and they won't leave her side. They have separation anxiety, very sensitive. Gajendra is spraying his family members in the water, and then suddenly, crocodile grabs his leg out of nowhere. And this is what happens in this world. When we're least expecting it, perhaps, then something happens. So Gajendra used his own strength for some time to try to fight off the crocodile. And then he came to a point of realization that I can't win. And every one of us will come to this point at some time in our life where we realize that this is it. And somebody the other day, we were having a discussion on one of our online forums, and a very intelligent person who joins there all the time was saying that we were talking about what it's like at the time of death, and he said, it's a time of reconsideration. It gives us a special perspective, but we gather like this, and so have sages for millennia, to preemptively reconsider. So there's a way in which we think about things, how to be in the moment now and realize our helplessness. Kaustubha Prabhu today up on the Sermon on the Mount, it was so beautiful. We all went up there just before sunrise, and he talked about the sun. And one of the points he made was about not being dependent on our so-called status in the world and maintaining the status quo, but being very humble and dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. This is real life. That's real happiness. If I can do it preemptively by hearing from great souls who are in that mode, they've given up the idea that I have to maintain some status based on my body and my mind. There's a kind of potency that they have when they speak and as they move in the world. And as I began this monologue, there's a way in which if we emulate them and watch what they did and practice in the same mode, then we'll also come to this point of safety. As did Gajendra when he realized he was being overpowered by a crocodile in the water. And what did he do? Same as Cat Stevens, he began to pray. He didn't even know who the Supreme was at that time. But he called out that I'm helpless. You want to try it? Yes. Okay, just call out and say, I'm helpless. I'm helpless. Yeah, I'm not convinced. I'm helpless. Yeah, I'm still not convinced. I'm helpless. I know it seems a little constrained. It's like, oh, what's up people going to think? And maybe that's I don't know, is that a cult or something? But actually it's truth. It's actually the truth. I'm helpless. And if I'm able to be in that truth in the moment, and I'm able to call out God's names at that point, then there's complete cognition of my connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead in that very moment. And there's no fear. My fear comes from trying to hold on. I try to hold on to the status of this body. It's impossible. I try to arrange it in many ways, my reputation and everything else. Oftentimes we have we have teachable moments when something is unceremoniously taken from us, perhaps our reputation or something else valuable. And don't we then have that opportunity to say, oh well, we become philosophical, I'll start over. It's a relief, right? So bhakti, spiritual life, means to cultivate that. Cultivate that now and to live in that truth that actually I'm helpless and I'm fully dependent on the Supreme. And then the chanting. This is what Bhaktivinoda Thakur was saying in the song. The chanting is a cry out that please, I'm helpless, no mas. I'm not going to try to defend myself. I'm going to only take shelter of you in all these circumstances that I'll encounter in my life. And the next song we'll sing is a song about the spiritual world. And so just this morning I was listening to a talk by my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, and he was saying that if you want to go somewhere, you have to hear about it a little bit. Have you ever had this experience? And he was saying, he was in New York at the time in 1966, and he had only been to Boston and New York at that time. He came to America out of a feeling of a duty to his spiritual master to teach what he knew, what he had learned about bhakti to the rest of the world, especially the Western world. And so he was in New York and he was speaking to a very small crowd. I think there was one person at the time. You can hear his exchange he's having with a woman there that's asking a lot of questions. You can hear this. It's the 7th recording that was made of Prabhupada when of all the recordings he ever made. And so he was explaining to her that actually I'm not happy in New York. I'd rather be in Vrindavan. That's my home. I only came here and I'm enduring all these inconveniences because it was my duty to do this and to give this knowledge. And then he said if you want to go somewhere, if you want to go back to the spiritual world, you have to hear about it. So he said, just like in San Francisco, he named Cohen. I think that was Mukunda Maharaj, right? His last name was Cohen. So one of the devotees who had started in New York said, I'm going to San Francisco, when he was leaving. And just as he was leaving, Prabhupada said, oh, by the way, please start another center there. He had other plans, actually. He was on his way out the door, and he was going to go to San Francisco and then to India. He was a musician. He was going to learn some classical Indian music, and he had helped the Swami in New York, and that was pretty much all. But then all of a sudden he heard this voice as he was walking out the door. Oh, by the way, start a center in San Francisco. Actually, Prabhupada had a similar experience. When he first met his spiritual master, there's a place in Calcutta which is one of the most interesting places to go and look around and look at the spiritual origins of bhakti. Those who know Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had started his flagship temple there in Baghbazar. And then there's Ultadanga Junction Road. It's hard to say. Try to say it. Ultadanga Junction Road. 3 times now. Ultadanga Junction Road. And then you go back. Click your heels. So there's the original place where Prabhupada, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, had met his spiritual master. The very place where he met him, he walked upstairs, the very stones that he stepped on to walk up there. And as he described it, as did my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada, he said that he offered obeisances to this saintly person that he had been compelled to meet by his friend who pulled him along and said, no, you have to meet this one. It's really good. And so when he went in and he was paying his obeisances, just as he was sitting back up again, his future guru was telling him that you should spread Krishna consciousness in the West. Too late. Tag. You've got it. There's something very powerful, as I was saying earlier, about the words of somebody who is representing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because when he or she speaks, there's a mandate that's implicit in the words. And if one wants to be fortunate, one can simply take that and make it one's own agenda. This is how to be successful. If you want to know also how to outsmart a genius, it's to just have a better plan and follow the plan. You don't have to be a genius. You just have to follow the right plan. So that's what Prabhupada did. And then he talked about how if I hear about from this person who went to San Francisco, and he was hearing it's like this and like that, he said, then I desire to go there, and I get a ticket and go. So the next song is about the spiritual world, and it describes what goes on there. And what goes on in the spiritual world are loving exchanges between Krishna and his devotees and between all the devotees. And the loving exchanges have to do with relationships. And spiritual life, the pinnacle of spiritual life, means to reawaken our loving relationship with Krishna and his devotees. And when we have that, then our heart is full and we don't need anything else. Do you believe me? Please say yes. Okay, let's sing the song and hear about the activities of the loving exchanges in the spiritual world. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihar Jaya Gopi Jana Balava Jaya Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Balava Jaya Girivardhari Jaya Braja Jana Ranjana Jaya Jashura Nandana Jaya Braja Jana Ranjana Jaya Jamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Jamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Girivardhari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Ram Rama Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol. Let's just hear a little bit from the Bhagavatam, but first we'll chant a mantra for us to be ready to receive the message. So if you'll repeat after me, please. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And for continuing, I offer my respectful obeisances to my spiritual master and to all of you who are on this divine path of devotional service. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. So, the context of the Bhagavatam is that there's a seminar or a retreat just like this. And sages have gathered together in a forest, almost like this. And it is a place called Naimisharanya. It's said to be the exact center of the universe. Because actually, here on Earth, we're on the ground floor, which is a good place to be because you can get out of the building. If you're way at the top, you have to take the elevator down or the stairs. If you're way in the bottom, you got to come up here to get out on the ground floor. The Earth planet is especially meant for self-realization. It's not too nice, in case you haven't noticed. And it's not too bad either. It's right in the middle. It's fine-tuned for those who wish to refine themselves in the process of spiritual life. And as a preparation, you're not harassed by conditions so much that you can't do anything. And it's a little balanced. So they met there with a topic. And the topic was how to do the greatest good for the most people. Not just people, for all living entities. Isn't that a good seminar topic? Because there's a way in which I have in my own mind many troubles and tribulations. Anybody? Can you relate? Thank you. I feel better now. It's constant. There's constant anxiety. I wake up in the middle of the night. Oh no, I didn't get to this. I didn't get to that, and so forth. There are a lot of miseries in this world, and they all come from the mind and the body, my identification with the body and the mind. So the sages, who were liberated souls, knew this, and they wanted to come up with a way that in the future, which they saw would be a little bit troublesome for people, especially because it would be a mechanical age. They were seers. They understood what was coming, and things are cyclical in this world. And there was a troubling age coming, and this was their intention. Their intention was to find out what can we do for everyone, for the mass of people, for all living entities, so that they can overcome the obstacles that will be inherent in the age that we're living in now, called Kali. In fact, we're 5,000 years into it. It's kind of just the beginning, and it's living up to its billing. So they were The sages then appointed a speaker based on his qualification. His name was Suta Goswami. And Suta Goswami is said to have been a very gentle soul. Veta tvam samya tat sarvam tatvatas tadanugrahat bruyus nigdasya shishasya guravo kuyamapyuta. They say, the sages, to this very advanced person, that you've followed the spiritual path very strictly. You're also a gentle soul. So because you're gentle and you rendered service to your spiritual teachers, they've been very open-hearted with you. They gave you all their secrets. They told you everything. And therefore, you're qualified. You know how to teach us. This was the very non-competitive way that sages would get together. They would decide amongst themselves, let's put this person up there, because the audience and the speaker are 50-50. It's not that one's better than the other. Both are required. Have you ever tried to speak to an audience when somebody's going like this? Like, it's very difficult. We depend on this connection through consciousness. So there has to be a 50-50. So they put him up there. Did the sages put up Suta Goswami was his name. What's his name? Suta Goswami. Correct. And so Suta Goswami, they began to pose questions to them, because questions are the answer. If you ask good questions, the quality of the questions you ask will determine the quality of your life. So these are the best questions you're going to find anywhere. And one of them was, how do we do the greatest good for all living entities all over the world? Now, once we start answering that, we go out of the limited confines of our minds where all the anxieties reside, and we start thinking, how can I help other people? So this is now in this context that I'm going to read this particular verse. And this is the answer of one of the questions. And it has to do with how to solve all your problems. Would you like to know that? Yes. Okay, I tell you, but we ran out of time. Thank you for coming. I'll see you next time. Keep going? Yes. All right. The verse goes like this. Tasmad ekena manasa bhagavan sattvatam pati shrotavya kirtitavyascha dhyaya ujash chanityada. And the translation is, therefore, with one pointed attention, one should constantly hear about, glorify, remember, and worship the personality of Godhead, who is the protector of the devotees. And here's purport written by Srila Prabhupada. If realization of the absolute truth is the ultimate aim of life, it must be carried out by all means. In any one of the above-mentioned castes and orders of life, the four processes, namely glorifying, hearing, remembering, and worshiping, are general occupations. Without these principles of life, no one can exist. Activities of the living being involve engagements in these four different principles of life. Especially in modern society, all activities are more or less dependent on hearing and glorifying. Any man from any social status becomes a well-known man if in human society within a very short time, if he is simply glorified truly or falsely in the daily newspapers. Sometimes political leaders of a particular party are also advertised by newspaper propaganda, and by such a method of glorification, an insignificant man becomes an important man within no time. But such propaganda by false glorification of an unqualified person cannot bring about any good, either for the particular man or for the society. There may be some temporary reactions to such propaganda, but there are no permanent effects. Therefore, everyone okay so far? Last part. Therefore, such activities are a waste of time. The actual object of glorification is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has created everything manifested before us. We have broadly discussed this fact from the beginning of the Janmadhyasya shloka of this Bhagavatam. The tendency to glorify others or hear others must be turned to the real object of glorification, the Supreme Being, and that will bring happiness. So, just a short synopsis, and then we'll just take a few reflections and questions. Okay? That is that a spiritual practice at its best means you don't have to change who you are or what you're doing now. Well, you do have to change the point of focus. We have emotions, we have attachments, and sentiments. If those, when we direct those attachments, when we become attached to the right object, to the right person, when we have desires in relationship to that person, the Supreme Person, then we're acting in yoga. Huge connection. And then we feel fully satisfied and happy. And when I direct my love and I become towards those people and objects that are in relationship, not with my spiritual being, but just with my bodily existence, which is here today and gone tomorrow, then I misplace it. And therefore I feel out of alignment and I'm unhappy, simply put. So the process of bhakti means to do what we're doing now the way I might be glorifying somebody in this world or appreciating somebody, but finding out Janmadhyasya, which means who's the source of all people, of all beauty, of all fame, and then investing my consciousness there. And so the process is to use our natural proclivities in service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this is the way to overcome the various miseries of material life. And now let's take a few reflections or questions. Prabhu.
We have a little extra time.
Oh, we do?
Yeah, you can take an extra 10, 15 minutes.
Okay. I have an extra 15 minutes. Yes.
Glorification, there was 4 things that we need to focus on, you mentioned.
Yes. Thanks. That helps to have those lined up. Glorifying, what's an example of that? Of glorification? I'm not in the bhakti realm, but just in general.
Udabam.
What?
Udabam.
Udabam. Okay. Used to be Ud man, but Udabam. Okay, yes? Offering appreciations. Yeah, but give more, as much specific as you can. Yes?
I was just thinking Prabhupada mentioned the newspaper.
Newspaper. Yeah, somebody gets glorified in the newspaper. Like, can be even more specific? Yeah. Kent?
I think to glorify something, you focus your attention on.
Yeah, glorify, you focus your attention on. But let's say, yes? Beyonce. So Beyonce is a star, and she has God-given talents.
Awards.
And, award ceremonies. That's another one. And there's a way in which we could really fixate on a person here, because it's not unreasonable in one way, because any potency we see in this world is actually coming from the Supreme, and therefore we're attracted to it. So in Beyonce, we see something practically otherworldly, the way that she can perform. And it's, I can glorify her. I just did, actually, didn't I? So, but I could make a whole thing of it. Graceland. I don't know if you know what that is, but that's where the king was born, Elvis. I mean, there's radio stations dedicated to glorifying him. There's a whole process of people going there and paying homage and so forth. Glorifying, and then, yes?
Glorifying God within and offering yourself.
Now that's bhakti. So that's a redirecting that natural tendency to glorify, but you're glorifying the source. So in doing that, we don't exclude anybody else, because just as when you water the root of a tree, then all the branches and leaves are naturally satisfied. And so similarly, we don't exclude anyone when we glorify the source of all of the beings. And we actually can appreciate them in a deeper way. So glorifying was the first. And then we have, glorifying hearing. So here's the next question. What do you hear generally throughout the day, would you say? As a percentage, like what kinds of things might one hear? Yeah, television is something that one could subscribe to, right? It's still available.
Wisdom of the sages.
TV, wisdom of the sages, nature,
Kirtan.
listening to kirtan. What are ways that one might while away one's time listening to things that are not? They're sort of like
Radio.
junk food.
Talk show.
Yeah, so there's radio, there's endless talk about sports, who might win, and then after somebody wins, who cheated, or whatever. It can go on forever. The speculation is rampant. After the game's over, it's over. Why don't you talk about the next thing? But we have to talk about that, and then the next thing also. So there's endless topics for hearing in this world. So one of the principles here, tasmad ekena manasa, means ekena, find that one place where you glorify and where you hear, that you'll come to highest potential in life. And so hearing is the gateway to success in spiritual life. It's called Shravanam. And when you're born, you get, at least most people, standard equipment, you get 2 free ears thrown in with the deal. Check and see if they're still there. Did you get them?
Yes.
Come on, you're cool. Check and see if you got ears. Thanks. 2 ears. Don't look at them too long in the mirror, because you'll freak yourself out. You're like, what am I anyway? An alien? It's got little channels and everything like that. It's like, and it's coming off the side of my head. It's like, oh, he looks so good. And it's like, actually, he looks really weird. He's got ears hanging out. But they're meant for something. And when you take in spiritual sound vibration through these ears, then there's a transformative effect, systemic. It happens, as Prabhu was saying this morning up on the hill. He was saying, if you hear the chant, the Hare Krishna chant, you listen to the names, you expose yourself to it, then it will start to rise up in your heart and in your being, just like the sun rising. It comes of its own accord, and all we have to do is hear. Next one. So we had glorifying hearing. Does anybody remember number 3?
Remembering?
Yes. So generally, what we hear about, what we look at, what we glorify, that's what we're going to remember. And this is a very detailed science in yoga. Our mind is an absorbing agent. In fact, everything that we come in contact with, everything that we hear, not just in this life, but in all previous lives. And how many previous lives have you had? Approximately? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? A whole bunch?
Too many.
Too many. Each one of those, we have our recording devices from whatever species of life we're in. They're taking in information from the outside world. And it goes into the mind. The mind is like a cloud. That is a digital cloud that absorbs all of that information. And therefore, you might wonder, why do I think of particular things in a particular way? It's because the combinations and permutations of all the things that I've seen, heard, glorified in this life and in previous lives. And therefore, I have a particular disposition, a predisposition, in the way I approach life. We don't see the world the way it is. We see the world the way we are. And the way we are has to do with the way our minds are configured, due to what we've taken in. So there's a way to reverse that process, to remember the spiritual world, as we just sang a song about it a moment ago. So remembering is very important because, and final point on remembering, Krishna says very simply in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a simple truth about what happens when we leave our bodies. He says, Yang yang vapi smaran bhavam tajatyante kalevram tam tam evaiti kunteya sadatad bhava bhavita. Which means, whatever you remember when you're leaving this body will carry you to your next body. Because the material nature and Krishna are accommodating us in every aspect of our life. So whatever we most desire when we leave the world, whatever our prominent desire is, will determine the accommodation we get in the next life. Therefore, it's important to practice this bhakti yoga throughout one's life so that I have this intense feeling of love, that I want to be with Krishna, I want to be with the devotees. Just like all of you, that's why you're here, right? Say yes.
Yes.
Thank you. And last one. What is it? Worshipping. So worshipping is an interesting word. It originally comes from the word worth. But when you add ship onto a word, you can try it with other words, it turns it into a noun. So what something is worth means its value. And then when you say worship it through kind of Sandhi rules, the way we put words together, and the phonetical composition changes slightly. So worthship became worship. So where we place our attention, in whom we give our attention, to whom we give our attention, what we find valuable, that's where we worship. So the sages here are telling us, give what's of most value to us in this world, the object that will most satisfy us and all living beings, is the divine source of everything, who's a person, who's love personified, who's all beauty, and his name is Krishna. And that's why we chant Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. First time I heard that, I was like, what is that? And then, just the sound, it's like, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And you're like, I don't know what it is, but it's driving me crazy. And no one knows how deep it is. No one's ever been able to find the bottom of that mystery. So if you chant Hare Krishna, and you hear Srimad-Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, and associate with devotees, and then put your heart into it. Like, don't be afraid to give yourself to this. It's like you might people might go crazy with some musician and, take off all their clothes and run across the stage. It was like, I love you, right? Misplaced. Don't do that. Of course, don't do that here either. But a mood of complete surrender is like, you can do that with Krishna in your heart, at home. No, here too. You can feel free to open that worshiping nature that you have, that loving nature to Krishna, and you'll never ever be disappointed, and you'll become completely happy. So just the last review of the verse goes like this: Tasmad means therefore, because in the previous verses the sages were talking about the difficulties of life. And now they say how to solve it. Tasmad ekena means one. Ek means one. Say ek means one. Manasa means mind. So be one-pointed in your mind. Tasmad ekena manasa bhagavan sattvatam pati. So pati means the one who protects us. We have one pati who's taking care of us. He's feeding us. He's watching over us. He's in your heart right now. Feel your heart? He's in there. He's our companion. Companion comes from Old French into Latin, and it means somebody you break bread with, because pane means bread. Companion. The one that you're most intimate, your best friend, he's there in your heart. Tasmad ekena manasa bhagavan sattvatam pati shrotavya. Shrotavya. Come on. Work with me, people. Hold your ears now. Shrotavya. Kirtitavyas. Kirtita means to glorify, to say Hare Krishna. Kirtitavyascha Dhyaya means to remember, to meditate. Dhyaya, pujam. Pujam means to worship. You could put an altar up. You can bow down to it. It'll feel good. It's the best thing you can do. Put your head down before Krishna. Then you feel happy. Dhyaya pujas to nityada. And how often should you do it? Nityada means a lot. You got to do it a lot. And if you do it a lot, or the more you do it, the happier you'll get. And the more people you teach it to, the simple system, you just bring them over to your house and say, here, watch this. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And by the way, try some of this food. It's offered to Krishna. And then next thing, they'll be going around, Hare Krishna. And if you do that, then your life is complete, and you need no other occupation. Om Tat Sat. Thank you very much, everybody. Hare Krishna. Thank you.